Hi, I'm Bruce von Stein, and I'm here to cook with you again. I'm a proud sponsor of the Enlighten Foundation and its mission, and I want to make some soup with you today. The secret to my soup is filling it full of delicious vegetables. And the thing you can do with your kids or family members who may be a little bit sketchy with vegetables is you just sort of sneak them in so they don't really notice it. And I honestly will tell you, these vegetables are delicious in the soup. I'm not going to add chicken to this wild rice soup, but if you'd like to, you certainly can. Let's get started. We've got a lot of delicious ingredients here for our wild rice soup. Of course, the hero ingredient is some wild rice, and we'll cook it with some water and oil. We'll also be sauteing some onions, some sweet potatoes, and carrots, and mushrooms. To that, we'll add a little bit of garlic, some bay leaf, and rosemary, and that'll be all sauteed in some butter. Once that's all cooked in, we're gonna add some flour and then some organic chicken stock and organic bouillon. And then we're gonna top it off with some half and half and some kale, and then garnish it with some green onions, and then just season it to taste. So let's get going. Let's make the wild rice. I've got about 1/3 cup of wild rice, 4 cups of water, and a tablespoon of olive oil. And you're going to want to get it cooking. Once you see it start to boil, you're going to want to turn down the heat and let it cook for about 20 or 30 minutes or until the wild rice is soft. That's the key. It's getting the wild rice soft. Let's let it cook. Let's check on our wild rice. It looks nice and done, so we're gonna set it aside and start cooking the soup itself. Let's turn on the stove to about medium, and we're gonna add our butter. To that butter, we're going to saute some onions, some sweet potatoes, some carrots, and some mushrooms. If you'd like, you can also add some celery or whatever other vegetables you like. It's really, make this how you like it. I just really love how the sweet potatoes add a nice, just sweet taste when you bite into them, and the mushrooms make it even more savory. So let's get this going. We can turn it up a little bit. Now that that's started to saute, we're going to take a little bit of minced garlic. I've got 2 cloves here. Just gonna add it to the mix. That adds lots of flavor without being too garlicky. We're gonna add a bay leaf and some rosemary. I always like to add the aromatics, which are like garlic and rosemary and bay leaf, while the vegetables are still sauteing, because it helps bring out a lot of that flavor into the soup. Now you're going to want to keep sauteing these until the onions start to turn translucent and the vegetables start to soften. So the onions are starting to turn translucent, and the mushrooms are soft, and the carrots and sweet potatoes are starting to soften. So you're going to want to add some flour. The flour, I'm using a whole wheat pastry flour. I always like to use whole wheat flour. It's just a little bit better for you than that highly processed all-purpose flour, and you really can't tell a difference, especially when you use whole wheat pastry flour. So the flour is used to thicken the soup, and you just want to coat all the veggies and cook the flour a little bit to get away that raw taste of flour, and you're going to get more of a cooked taste, almost toasted. And that's going to add another savory taste to the soup. Okay, now we're going to add our wild rice that we cooked earlier. It's nice and soft and delicious. It's a nice toasted sort of delicious flavor. We're going to add some chicken broth. We're going to add some bouillon. Now this is one of my secret ingredients. I find a lot of times with sauces and soups that you can add a whole lot of flavor with a high quality either chicken or vegetable or beef bouillon. I'm using a chicken bouillon, but if you want to make this a vegetarian soup, you could just as easily use a vegetable bouillon with some vegetable broth. Stir that in and let it warm up. When you start to see it boiling, which we're not quite there, you'll want to add our half and half, but let's just let it have a little bit more time. You'll also see the soup start to thicken. That flour, once it starts to boil, will make the soup thicken up. We don't want it too thick. I like a more brothy, slightly thick wild rice soup. If you want to make it thicker, you can always add a little bit more flour to your soup. But make sure you add it with the vegetables. If you add it now, you'll just get clumps of flour in with your soup. It'll be really hard to get rid of those clumps. So it is starting to boil. You're just going to want to let it boil a little bit. That'll help let that flour get to work and thicken up your soup a little bit. Just thickening up just a little bit. Okay, now that it's getting nice and bubbly and thick, we're going to add our half and half, and we're going to turn the heat down. In general, you don't want to boil the soup once you've added the half and half. Now, if you want to make it a little bit less lower calorie or lower fat, you can use a skim milk or a whole milk. You can also use a non-dairy milk if you want. It's just not going to be as creamy. I definitely suggest if you're going to do that, maybe add a little bit more flour to get it a little bit more texture, a little bit more thickness to your soup. Now, adding veggies is always good, and I love kale. Even if you don't like kale, I think you won't even tell the difference in this. It's all about sneaking in some vegetables. So I'm just going to take a handful or two, mix it in, and look at this, yummy. That green of the kale and the orange of the carrots and the sweet potatoes. I mean, you eat with your eyes and it's just all this delicious color that's good for you and delicious in this soup. Yum. And the last thing you want to do before you serve the soup is just season it to taste. Just take a little bit of a taste of it. Add some pepper. Add a little bit of salt, but always, there we go. That bouillon adds a lot of flavor, so you always want to taste it before you season it, so you don't get too much salt in your soup. Let's serve it up. This smells delicious. Got a couple bowls here. I always like to garnish my soup with a little bit of something. I've got some green onions here, but you can also use some croutons or a little bit of cheese, whatever you like. It's your soup. Just slice off a little piece of bread. Grab a spoon. and enjoy. Delicious.